Jordan Beard is Johnson's nephew. Jordan Beard is Joleen Cummings' cousin.
Jordan Beard is Jolene's cousin.
Jordan Beard is Joleen Cummings' cousin.
Jordan Beard is Jolene's cousin.
The case of Kimberly Kessler is a true crime story that will leave you on the edge of your seat. Known by various aliases, including Jennifer Seibert, Kessler is a woman accused of the brutal murder of Joleen Cummings, a mother of three who disappeared from her job at a hair salon in Yulee, Florida, in May 2018. Cummings' body has never been found, and Kessler, who was employed at the same salon, has been the prime suspect since her arrest in June of that same year. As we begin, it's important to acknowledge and express our deepest sympathies to the loved ones of Joleen Cummings. This case takes us to Fernandina Beach, a charming coastal town located on Amelia Island, Florida, known for its historic downtown district, sandy beaches, and vibrant cultural scene. Back in 2018, Jennifer Seibert, a 50-year-old woman, found herself a fresh start in Fernandina Beach, working at the Tangles Hair Salon, her fifth job in just 6 months. With her troubled past, Seibert had been running for years, hiding deep, dark secrets that she hoped to keep buried. One of those secrets involved the disappearance of 35-year-old Kimberly Kessler, who had vanished from her hometown of Butler County, Pennsylvania, back in the mid-2000s. Kimberly Kessler had been missing for 8 years, and despite her family's efforts to file a missing persons report, they were left with no answers. However, Jennifer Seibert held a closely guarded secret, one that could solve the mystery of Kessler's fate. Yet, trouble and suspicion seemed to be Seibert's constant companions, following her wherever she went. This time, it was happening again at Tangles, where her co-worker Joleen Cummings seemed to possess a sixth sense about Seibert's past. Cummings persistently probed her with questions, unafraid to share her doubts and suspicions with their colleagues. The pressure was becoming unbearable for Seibert, and on May 18, 2018, she finally confronted Cummings, ready to confront the situation head-on. With Jolene on her tail, Seibert knew she had to be careful, but she couldn't resist the urge to follow her co-worker and another colleague outside. Unfortunately for Jennifer Seibert, Jolene caught her eavesdropping, and the confrontation was intense. Jolene didn't mince words, calling Seibert out as a fake and crazy. Seibert didn't defend herself. Instead, she quietly plotted her revenge. The next day at the salon, Seibert was on edge and unsure if she could pull off her plan. Seibert tried to focus on her job while Jolene kept pestering her for help with clients. Seibert pretended to be confused and hid behind a wall, frustrating Jolene to the point of fury. Despite her anger, Jolene kept up a cheerful act with the salon customers as she was looking forward to celebrating her birthday and Mother's Day with her 3 children the next day. Little did Jolene know that Seibert was already one step ahead of her, as surveillance footage from a gas station captured Seibert in the early hours of May 13th, just a few miles away from the salon. With red marks and scratches on her face, she approached the manager and explained that she had a run-in with a friend's ex-boyfriend earlier that night. In need of a ride back to the salon to finish up some cleaning, she requests to use the manager's phone to call a taxi. Meanwhile, on May 13th at 1:00 p.m., Jolene's ex-husband, Jason Cummings, waited with their 3 children at a Winn-Dixie in Hilliard, ready to hand them over to their mother. However, Jolene was nowhere to be found and wasn't answering her phone. It was unlike her to be late, especially on her birthday and Mother's Day. Concerned, Jason returned home with their children, fearing the worst. Even though their relationship had ended, Jason still deeply cared for Jolene. That fateful afternoon, he made a distressing call to Jolene's mother, Ann Johnson, who had already reported her daughter missing to the authorities. In response, the sheriff's department quickly launched a search, releasing a missing persons flyer on the morning of May 15th. Their search led them to Tangles Hair Salon, where they wanted to question Jennifer Seibert, the last person who had reportedly seen Jolene. Ironically, just as they arrived, Seibert had pulled up outside the salon. But when a colleague informed her that the police were looking for her, she sped off in her car, before calling the station with a flimsy excuse: a supposed hacker stalker that would find her if her name was entered into any database. The police's suspicions were aroused, and they soon discovered that all of Seibert's addresses were bogus. They eventually located her, fast asleep in her black Kia Soul, at a rest area in St. Johns County that very evening. As deputies approached Kimberly Lee Kessler's car, they couldn't help but notice the band-aids on her face and hands. When they asked about them, she explained that they were covering scratches she received from riding her bike through a tree branch. But it was evident that she had been living in her car for some time. Meanwhile, a search for Jolene's missing SUV led authorities to a Home Depot parking lot, where they discovered the abandoned vehicle. Surveillance footage revealed that the car had entered the lot on May 13th, and a few minutes later, someone exited the SUV, but it wasn't Jolene, it was Jennifer Seibert. The police eventually arrested Seibert for stealing Jolene's car, and during questioning, they stumbled upon a strange revelation. According to the social security number Seibert provided, Jennifer Seibert had died in a car crash in 1987. But when the authorities ran her fingerprints, they were shocked to discover that the woman in their custody was none other than the missing woman from Butler County, Pennsylvania, Kimberly Lee Kessler. As investigators dug deeper into the case, they uncovered a shocking twist. The missing person they had found was now the prime suspect in another disappearance. But why would Kimberly Kessler, the woman they had just located, be using a stolen identity? The more they delved into Kessler's past, the more unsettling details they unearthed. It soon became apparent that Kessler had a dark and disturbing history, and investigators began to wonder if she was involved in other unsolved disappearances. Kessler was born in Butler County, Pennsylvania, in 1968 and grew up as the eldest of 3 siblings. Her childhood seemed normal, and she was well-liked by her peers. However, things took a turn when she was still in her early teens. Classmates described a sudden and alarming shift in her behavior, saying that she seemed to have transformed into an entirely different person. She used to be friends with the popular kids, said one former classmate. Then it was like something snapped, and everyone was afraid of her. One former friend was so terrified by Kimberly Kessler's alarming change of personality that she tried to avoid her altogether. She was a scary individual, she said. According to Ray Wyant, who knew Kessler and her brother Bob, it was clear that she had a violent temper and would go to extreme lengths if someone crossed her. In fact, after a fight with Bob, Kessler waited until he was asleep and then attacked him with a baseball bat, knocking out most of his teeth. Tim Barnes, who briefly dated Kessler after high school, also remembers her violent outbursts. During their time together, she killed his cat with a shotgun, stabbed him in the chest, and even assaulted his father. In a tragic twist of fate, Bob was involved in a serious motorcycle accident that killed his friend the same year that Seibert died in 1987. The rumors about Kessler's involvement in a road accident were rampant. She began to show a fascination with aliases, according to reports. Her ex-partner, Tim Barnes, shared with detectives that Kessler once visited a graveyard where her father was buried. Instead of paying her respects to her father, Kessler walked around the graveyard, scouting for the names of young girls she could steal. In the early 1990s, Zylan Losi married Kessler twice, both times under the alias Melissa McKernan. He described their relationship as unstable. In 1996, Kessler had a child with Tim Edwards, whom she dated at the time under the name Miranda McKernan. But she listed the name Christina Brooks on her son's birth certificate, claiming that the fake names were necessary to hide from her abusive family and her child's abusive father. Kessler's son was removed from her custody by social services in 1999. In an unsuccessful attempt to regain custody, Kessler showed up at the social services office with a handgun before disappearing without a trace. She mentioned her desire to leave town long before she vanished, citing fear of her ex-partner as the reason. The last sighting of Kessler was on July 4, 2004, in Butler County. From 2004 to 2018, Kessler traveled across the country, taking up various jobs like waitressing and stripping. In 2004, she obtained a cosmetology license under a fake name in Florida. However, people who knew Kessler during this period found her to be eccentric, unable to hold down a job, and prone to theft. They claimed that if you crossed her, she would exact revenge in a vicious manner. Kessler's obsession with aliases had spiraled out of control. She seemed to collect new identities like a fashionista collects shoes, adopting them as her new guise to run scams, steal, and disappear, only to reappear somewhere else and start afresh. Her behavior became increasingly erratic as time went by. One man, whom she befriended on Facebook, recalled how she drove from Florida to Texas to meet him for lunch just one day after they started chatting. On the same day, she proposed to him, but he turned her down, blocked her, and forgot about her. That is, until he learned from the police that she had been stalking him under 7 different aliases. One of her ex-partners said she was insanely jealous and that her fits of rage were so severe he feared for his life. Eventually, he sought police help and fled town. Undeterred, Kessler got married again, but their relationship quickly turned violent. During a fight, she attacked her husband with a pair of scissors, leaving him scarred for life. "I've met some crazy women," he said, but she was on a whole other level. In 2009, Kessler assumed yet another identity and rented a room from a man in Clearwater, going by the name Jennifer Seibert. But things quickly turned sour when Kessler accused him of breaking into her house and urinating on her bed, leading to her eviction. Her co-workers described her as bizarre, erratic, and secretive, with one former co-worker even suspecting that Kessler's entire history was made up. The co-worker knew her as Mia Stone, but one day she vanished without a trace in 2014. Kessler enrolled in a hair academy in Jacksonville, where her odd behavior continued to baffle those around her. According to her instructor, Kessler carried a notebook and took down notes on everything that was said. She even climbed into a cabinet to see if she would fit inside. But perhaps the most disturbing incident was when she asked to keep a piece of sunburned skin from a fellow student. The instructor was so disturbed by this request that she checked Kessler's criminal background. By 2018, Kessler had lived in 14 different states, 33 different cities, and had at least 17 different aliases. She was a master of deception, changing her appearance and identity like chameleons change their color. She had a knack for identity theft and could blend into any environment with ease. Before joining Tangles, a hair salon in Fernandina Beach, she worked for a brief stint at Woody's Barbecue. Her manager there described an incident where she ate a pound of beef with her bare hands, leaving him bewildered. Another co-worker sensed something odd about her and warned her daughter to be careful around her. In April 2018, Kessler returned to Tangles under a new name, Jennifer Seibert. Despite her unusual behavior, she was given the job. However, her manager noticed something strange and felt uncomfortable when she saw Kessler sitting in her car, watching her. Joleen Cummings had a gut feeling that something was off about her co-worker, Kimberly Kessler, and she couldn't shake it. Unfortunately, Joleen's instincts proved to be right, but it was too late. During her interrogation, Kessler was clearly annoyed when asked which name she preferred to be called by, but she confidently stated that her name was Kimberly Kessler, and her fingerprints would prove it. When questioned about Joleen, Kessler denied any knowledge of her. However, Kessler covertly slipped in a comment about Child Protective Services being called on Joleen and claimed to have seen a small bag of meth in her bag. The detective then shifted gears and presented Kessler with a cascade of evidence linking her to a violent altercation with Joleen Cummings. When the detective waited for Kessler's response, she calmly replied, "Let me answer this way, and you might not like it. I would like legal counsel." Sheriff Bill Leeper made a shocking announcement on May 22, 2018. Investigators had reason to believe that Joleen Cummings was not alive and that Kimberly Kessler was being held on a staggering $500,000 bond. The search for Cummings' body began, but Kessler was still tight-lipped. She didn't need to say anything, though. Police had uncovered a trove of evidence that proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that Kessler had planned Joleen's murder for weeks. Several weeks before Cummings vanished, Kessler had taken a photo of her appointment diary for April. Then, on April 30, 2018, Kessler had searched for terms like co-worker guilty of killing co-worker, missing person body not found, and no body, no crime. This was almost 2 weeks before Cummings vanished. In the days leading up to Joleen's disappearance, Kessler had performed thousands more searches on her phone. She looked up female murderers by country, cadavers, Murderpedia, Victimpedia, Autopsy, and Florida female murderers. Kessler also searched for images of Jolene, information about meth addicts, and even plastination, a technique used to preserve bodies and body parts. On May 5, 2018, a boating supply store employee was spooked by Kimberly Kessler's strange behavior when she came to buy heavy-duty zip ties. He felt the need to inform the authorities, and it turned out to be a critical piece of information. Surveillance footage from the morning after Jolene's disappearance showed Kessler driving Cummings' SUV into the Home Depot parking lot in Yulee. Just minutes later, Kessler was captured at a gas station with scratches on her face, calling a taxi. She then returned to the salon, where video surveillance footage captured her purchasing trash bags, gloves, an electric knife, and a large bottle of ammonia at Walmart. Later, she was seen struggling to move 2 heavy white trash bags to a dumpster near the hair salon. As all of this was happening, police had discovered a plethora of blood evidence linking Kessler to Cummings' murder. The salon was a grisly crime scene, as detectives found traces of blood everywhere. From the reception area to the walls, chairs, cabinets, and sink, the evidence pointed to a violent struggle. The use of luminol unveiled even more blood on a mop and mop strokes on the floor, indicating an effort to cover up the scene. Outside the salon, a tote bag was found, drenched in blood. Investigators found traces of blood in various places, including Kessler's storage unit, Cummings and Kessler's SUV, Kessler's black combat boots, a sock, and a pair of scissors. In addition, they found a disturbing collection of items that included 5 different license plates, 3 cell phones, 4 wigs, and several cut ponytails. Even more shocking was the fact that Kessler had searched for information on how to dismember a body after Cummings' disappearance. She had conducted a staggering 357 searches for Cummings' name within just 48 hours. When Kessler was apprehended, law enforcement officers noticed numerous injuries on her hands, arm, wrist, and thighs, a patch of hair missing from her head, and a bite mark on her thumb. The investigation into the disappearance of Joleen Cummings took a dark turn when investigators suspected Kimberly Kessler of dismembering and disposing of Cummings' body in a dumpster. Despite a thorough search of the Cheshire Island landfill in Folkestone, Georgia, Cummings' body was never found. Meanwhile, Kessler, who had abandoned her family 14 years prior, was now in jail with a hefty bond of $500,000. But even behind bars, Kessler was up to something. She called her mother, demanding bail money and insisting that the media coverage was all a conspiracy by the Illuminati. When her mother asked about the missing persons case, Kessler cut the line and later instructed her mother to pick up her belongings, including a motorbike and bicycle. Kessler's paranoid delusions and suspicious behavior only added to the mystery of Joleen Cummings' disappearance, leaving investigators and the public with more questions than answers. Kessler was a master of manipulation, and she knew exactly how to play the system to her advantage. Within weeks of her incarceration, she began to make demands to be moved to a different jail. When her requests were denied, she resorted to a hunger strike, determined to get her way. Her persistence paid off when law enforcement finally agreed to relocate her, but it was not long before she began to make new demands. This time, she wanted to be transferred to a psychiatric treatment facility, but once again, her requests were denied. In an act of desperation, Kessler went on a second hunger strike, lasting a grueling 56 days. The process of bringing her to justice for the Cummings family was prolonged and excruciating, and it seemed as though Kessler was determined to make it as difficult as possible. Despite her efforts to delay her trial, Kessler was indicted for first-degree murder in September 2018, but her trial didn't start until November 2021. The courtroom was in chaos as Kimberly Kessler repeatedly disrupted proceedings with her outbursts, delaying the trial time and time again. Multiple competency hearings were held to determine if Kessler was fit to stand trial for the murder of Joleen Cummings. Finally, a judge ruled that she was not delusional, but a manipulative and dangerous psychopath. Her refusal to cooperate was not due to mental illness, but because she simply did not want to. One juror observed that Kessler had been very clever to start with, but now she was trying to play the insanity card. Kessler's behavior behind bars was just as shocking. Guards and staff at Nassau County Jail were traumatized by her behavior. When she was finally transferred to the Florida Women's Reception Center, they celebrated with cake and ice cream. Her time there was no less turbulent, as she starved herself almost to death, threw feces at guards, and smeared herself, walls, and windows with excrement. She stripped naked and verbally abused staff with sexual and demeaning comments. In just a few months, she had lost more than half her body weight, dropping from nearly 200 pounds to a mere 74. In November of 2021, Kessler finally appeared in court for the pretrial process, but her repeated outbursts got her removed from the courtroom again. During one hearing, she appeared strapped in a wheelchair, shouting that a member of the public defender's office was related to Cummings and conspiring against her. The prosecution had a challenging case as they lacked a body, a weapon, and a confession. But on December 9, 2021, a jury found Kessler guilty of first-degree murder based on overwhelming circumstantial evidence, and she was sentenced to mandatory life in prison. "I felt her here. Justice has been served," Kessler's mother said, referring to Jolene. However, Nassau County Sheriff Bill Leeper made a haunting comment during a press conference. "I don't believe her for 1 second that this is her first murder. She's evil. Evil in the flesh." This comment raised the possibility of Kessler being a serial killer. Investigators found over 60 names on Kessler's phone labeled with words like Satanist, witch, and evil murderous gang, which only added to the suspicion. In jailhouse interviews, investigators probed Kessler about 2 names that appeared on her phone list: Kurt Christopher Allen and Grace Darling Bartley. Allen had passed away in Jacksonville in 2014, while Bartley had died in Kessler's hometown in 2009. Bartley's obituary mentioned her marriage to a Tim Bartley, and both Tim and his brother Wayne were also on Kessler's list. But that's not all investigators were concerned about. Before Joleen Cummings' tragic death, Kessler had already stabbed 2 men who miraculously survived. Jolene family's sole request was to know where Jolene's body was, but Kessler's refusal confirmed the unimaginable evil within her. "Grief is just the start," said Jolene's mother, Ann Johnson. For her children, the toughest part is waiting for justice and a discovery of Jolene's remains. Kessler's heartlessness and disregard for human life is beyond comprehension. Please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more shocking cases like this. Don't forget to hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest releases.